Hey guys, it's Father Sean Kilcawley from Integrity Restored, and today I want to talk to you about recognizing our rituals. Typically all of us who have struggled with compulsive behaviors or with addiction behaviors have rituals when we act out. So a typical ritual kind of looks like this. I have some vulnerable time in my life, like I'm feeling bored, lonely, angry, stressed, tired, unaffirmed. Like people don't really care about me. I'm feeling lonely. Traditional kind of vulnerable time is hungry, angry, lonely, tired. It might just be that you haven't gotten enough sleep lately. It might just be that, you've had some really negative contacts with a family member or a friend. But whatever our vulnerable time is, that's when we're most likely to go down that ritual pathway of acting out. And so we can have some vulnerable time, and then the next thing that happens is there's a trigger. A trigger can be anything. There are sexual triggers and non-sexual triggers. Sexual triggers are things like I saw an immodestly dressed girl. I saw some commercial on television, and it kind of got my mind going. I was watching a movie, and I wasn't expecting it, but there was this steamy scene in the movie, and then that kind of got me going. There can be non-sexual triggers like I am just bored and I have my cell phone in front of me, or I'm alone with the internet. Those can be non-sexual triggers, or getting a new computer that's not monitored by Covenant Eyes yet. Those can all be kind of non-sexual triggers. Then there's some emotional response that happens in a typical ritual. Right? And the emotional response is when my body starts to respond to that trigger. My brain starts to get that dopamine rush. I start to numb out a little bit, and my body starts preparing to act out because my brain knows what's coming next. Then there can be some kind of thought, and the thought usually starts off like, I don't want to look at pornography, and then so I want to get out of here, but I don't really know how to get out of here. At a certain point, those brain chemicals, they just start to take over, and our frontal cortex starts to shut down. And at that point, there's a second thought, like, well, maybe I'll just look at something that's not quite so bad. I haven't really done this in a long time. Maybe I deserve this. And then there's acting out, and then usually it's followed by remorse, right? So what does a typical ritual look like? And it's important for everyone to sort of map out what your ritual is, because it'll help you to identify like how I need to change my behaviors in the beginning of my ritual so it doesn't go all the way down the pathway. Once a very wise person said to me, you don't have to go all the way down the escalator. You can get off the escalator at any time. You don't have to hit bottom. And so when mapping out a typical ritual, we need to make sure that it's complete and that we have a good understanding of where things started and all the processes in that ritual that lead us to acting out. A lot of times I'll ask people, why do you act out? Well, I was stressed and I acted out. But there's probably a lot more to it than I was stressed and I acted out. It was like I was stressed. I tried to contact a friend. They weren't home. I felt lonely. I felt rejected. I went on Facebook, and then I ended up down this pathway. So this is a typical ritual for most of the people that I've ever worked with. I think it's really pretty typical ritual for any 20-something who struggles with pornography and masturbation. So the first thing that happens is that vulnerable time. I'm feeling vulnerable. Maybe I called home and my mom ended up yelling at me for the first 15 minutes because I never call home, and that makes me not want to call home. And then I feel guilty because I don't call home. And then when I do call home, I get in trouble. And, that happens to some people sometimes. Could be I got a bad grade on a test. Could be my professor doesn't really understand me. Could be my boss yelled at me and I don't really understand why. Any kind of those rejection or abandonment or feeling shameful kind of wounds that happen in our lives every day. So feeling vulnerable, and I'm alone with the internet, right? Alone with the internet, it's a trigger. So I'm feeling vulnerable, I'm kind of lonely, I'm alone with the internet, and I decide I'm going to check Facebook, social media, and email. Because typically when we are feeling lonely or we're feeling off, we check our social media. Like, I'm going to look on social media and see if anybody on social media really, is reaching out to me. So we check Facebook and nobody's reached out to us. Nobody's commented on our last post and we feel rejected. So then we check Instagram and nobody's really commented on our last thing, or nobody's reshared our last thing, or nobody's liked our last thing, and we feel rejected again. Nobody's reaching out to me. We go to our next social media, same again. We might check our email, hoping that I got the most amazing message in the last 30 seconds, and it doesn't show up either. And so the problem with all these social media apps and email and technology is that when we're feeling lonely, we go to those things in order to connect with people, and we end up getting rejected like 15 times in 2 minutes, which makes us feel even worse. And so we feel alone. And then what do we do when we're feeling alone? We recheck our social media. And this time when we recheck our social media, there can be a trigger. Like, I check my Facebook or Instagram feed and I see a really pretty girl and I'm like, wow, that's a really pretty girl. So I check her feed and I start looking through her pictures and I notice she has a pretty friend. And then the next thing I know, I'm looking at a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend's bikini pictures on Facebook. And that's kind of got me going down this road, and my brain starts dissociating a little bit, and I'm just like cruising on social media looking at pictures of people, but I'm not really looking at porn. And then I might jump over, in the midst of that kind of a trigger, I jump over to YouTube. And then on YouTube, somebody might watch the 10 most inappropriate videos that were produced in 2017, right? It's not porn, but it's almost porn. And we think to ourselves, I'm not looking at porn. And then we're looking. And then there's like this switch that goes off and we think to ourselves, well, I actually might as well have started looking at porn about 5 minutes ago. And that's the next thought that comes into our head, is I might as well be looking at porn. And so then the next thought that comes into our head, typically if we're a good Catholic Christian, is, can I get to confession? Right? Can I get to confession as part of the ritual? And it's important that we name it as part of the ritual. Can I get to confession? And the answer might be, yeah, I can go tomorrow. I can make some time to go. And if the answer is yes, I just move forward and act out. Right? Then I end up on a pornography site. Afterwards, I feel worthless. And then in the midst of that, I kind of think to myself, well, I already acted out once. I might as well keep acting out until I can go to confession. So there's more behavior. Lots of shameful, negative self-talk about how bad I am and how I shouldn't be doing this, and this is horrible. And if I was really a believer, I wouldn't be falling into this right now. Then I go to sacramental reconciliation, kind of confess my sin. I receive absolution. I feel better. I resolve to never act out again until the next time I'm feeling vulnerable. Right? This is a typical ritual for most people. And so what can we do immediately to respond to this ritual? Once you've written out your own ritual, whatever it looks like for you, as soon as I'm feeling vulnerable and I'm alone with the internet, instead of checking Facebook, social media, email, I'm going to pick up my phone and I'm going to call a friend and talk to them on the phone. Right? When I was young and we were bored, we picked up the phone and we called a friend and we talked to them on the phone. And if they weren't there, if they didn't answer the phone, we just called another friend. And maybe another friend, until we actually got a voice on the phone and we talked to them and they kind of helped to regulate our emotions and bring us back into reality and tell us everything's going to be okay. And then we feel better. And we kind of debunk all the rest of the stuff that happens in our ritual. The other takeaway is to get the ritual of confession out of our acting out ritual. As soon as we're asking ourselves the question, can I get to confession? Turn your computer off, walk away, call a friend, do something different. Right? Because otherwise, the sacrament of reconciliation, which is a sacrament of mercy, it's a sacrament of healing, it's a place where we go and we say, this is exactly who I am. And Jesus says, I love you anyways. Otherwise, that sacrament just kind of becomes an enabler that keeps us stuck in this cycle. I've also talked to other priests who had penitents who told them the only time they ever feel loved is when they go to sacramental reconciliation after they act out. And so there's something about the ritual for them that they're really looking for the high and the affirmation after going to sacramental reconciliation. And that affirmation can happen like all of the time. All of the time. It can happen without acting out. At our worst moments, our Lord has loved us. While we were yet sinners, Christ loved us. And so it's important that, you remove the ritual of confession from your acting out ritual, which is also why it's important to go to confession frequently and to go to confession when you haven't acted out. So I'm going to go to confession every week, regardless of whether or not I am in mortal sin, just so I'm used to going to confession without having committed the sin of pornography or masturbation. Right? It helps us to experience the sacrament of reconciliation, right, in its proper place, right? Not as part of our typical acting out ritual, but rather as a sacrament of mercy and a sacrament of healing and a preventative medicine from further acting out in the future or further sin in the future. So I hope that this was helpful for you and encourage all of you, if you haven't yet mapped out your ritual, to go ahead and map out your ritual, and share that with a friend and ask for their input on that and see if there's anything that you're missing, so that you come to grow in greater self-knowledge, right? And with greater self-knowledge, then we can apply more tools to our life to help us to live joyful chastity, right? And truly live in the freedom of being sons and daughters of the Father, to live in the freedom of the children of God. All right? God bless, and until next time, if you have any further questions or you want more information, check us out at www.integrityrestored.com. God bless.